Welcome to the Sports on Tap NEO High School Football Show. Be sure to join the conversation by liking us on Facebook and following us on Twitter at SOT Podcast. Use the hashtag SOTHSF. Here are your hosts, Rob Trump, Josh Jeffy, Ed Dick, and Sean Duffy.
And welcome to Sports on Tap. It's our high school football playoff coverage here on Mixler. I'm Rob Trump. We have Josh Jeffy, Ed Dick, Sean Duffy, live from Studio J in Brunswick. And, guys, a lot to get to tonight. Some playoff action in the regional semifinals, which we had some really good games. And, actually, I thought we covered one of the best games probably of the week. Wouldn't you say, Ed?
We're pretty good at picking games. Let's just say that.
It's a gift.
Yes,
It really
yes.
is.
We've been quite fortunate this year to even throughout the whole the regular season, the games that we've been fortunate enough to go to and be able to cover. They've been very interesting, save for one that happened to involve my team. But regardless of that, so far in the playoffs, two great games that we've covered, and look forward to talking about that game a little bit later here, and also having a special guest who was who had a lot to do with that game as well. A little bit later
we
in
can
the
go
show.
ahead and say right around 8:30 or so, we're going to have Olmsted Falls defensive coordinator Rob Pace on. Very energetic coach. Really did a heck of a job this past game, kind of locking down the Wadsworth offense, which
It's not easy to do.
it was noted, and we mentioned it, and he knew of it, that, their lowest scoring output of the year was 41 points, and Olmsted Falls kept them to 20. So that was a really big deal. So he did a good job. He's kind enough to be scheduled to join us a little bit later on, so very much looking forward to that interview.
Yeah, no, he's always a great guy. Really great insight, too, on high school football, and a great game that we'll get to a little bit later in the show. And we'll tell you all the scores from different divisions and regions coming up. But first, we're going to jump into Division I, Region 1, in which, Josh Jeffy, I think you had a pretty interesting game that you had a chance to cover. Because I'll tell you what, we were surprised at first. I mean, we heard the score at the stadium to start off, and things changed in the second half.
Well, that's the game we'll talk about second. The first game that we'll mention, there's a little tease for you.
That's a tease, Rob. That's what happens when you tease something.
Oh, interesting.
Two GC teams were in the state semi-regional finals. The first GCC team was Euclid, but in this matchup, they were up against the top-seeded St. Ignatius Wildcats, and Euclid goes down 45-22 in this game. St. Ignatius started the scoring off in the first quarter with a 39-yard field goal by Matthew Trickett. In the second quarter, St. Ignatius then scored again. It was on a 9-yard scramble for a touchdown by Ignatius quarterback Daniel Alexander. And this game was 10-0 at the half, so Euclid was keeping it close. And then just like the previous matchup they had earlier, Euclid gave up a lot of points in the second half. In fact, St. Ignatius outscored Euclid 28-6 in the second half. Touchdowns for Ignatius. It was all about the running game. Running back Jack Welsh had 74 yards, 2 touchdowns, and running back Jahaj Floyd, 118 yards and a touchdown. Now for Euclid, they did get some scoring in this game in the second half. Drayvon Lindsay had a 75-yard touchdown reception. Brandon Wright had a 26-yard run, and Ronald Lee, old reliable Ronald Lee, had a 1-yard TD run. He finished the game with 100 yards. Heck of a season for him. He rushed for over 2,300 yards. In fact, 2,300 yards on the dot, 23 touchdowns. That is a single-season school record for him and the Euclid Panthers in this game. But, again, this was all about St. Ignatius and their just kind of dominance in the second half. Total yardage on the offense, Euclid was able to do some things on offense, 332 yards of offense, but they could not stop St. Ignatius in this game. They had 435 yards of total offense. So St. Ignatius, you got to give credit to Euclid in that first half. Just in that second half, that's where they lost the game, being outscored 28-6. Now on to the other regional semifinal game, as Rob mentioned previously. One GCC team is still in the mix. Menor with a 21-13 victory over number 2 seeded St. Edward Eagles. St. Ed's was actually up 10-0 after the first quarter. Tylen Rice had an 18-yard TD run, and there was a 29-yard field goal. And then in the second quarter, Menor rallied by touchdowns by Elijah McDougall and Logan Shea. They actually gained the lead 14-10 at half. That's where it remained. In the fourth quarter, St. Edwards had hit a field goal that made it 14-13. But that was all the scoring for St. Ed's in this game. Menor, after that, went on a 13-play, 80-yard drive that was capped by a Chris Edmond 2-yard TD run with 5:17 left in the game. And then Menor's defense, which hasn't been talked very much this year, really came up and stepped up big in this game, was able to hold off Eds in the fourth quarter, and they came away with a 21-13 victory. Menor ran the ball 49 times in this game, only 23 passes. Tadas Tatarunas, who we talk about every week, or I do at least, he's always mentioned of having a lot of passing yards and a lot of touchdowns. In this game, only 90 yards passing. So there was a conservative effort to run the ball. Now, we mentioned how cold it was. I think the weather had a lot to do with a lot of the lower offensive outputs in this game. This is the first time all year that the kids and the fans have been
the media.
Yeah, in the media, too.
Yeah.
Have been in this kind of weather. It was really, really exceptionally cold. Temperatures in the mid to upper 20s, but with the wind chill felt like upper teens, low 20s, so very cold. But a total offense for Menor, back to the game, 311 yards total offense, 221 was on the rushing end. So, again, they made a conservative effort to run the ball. Menor will play St. Ignatius in the D1 Region 1 regional final at Bedford Bearcat Stadium coming up this Friday.
Yeah, 7:30 are all games now, and Menor was down, Menor was down what, 10-0? I think when we heard that score,
10-0 at the end of the first,
and I mean, what a turnaround! And you said, what's surprising is they ran the ball quite a bit in that game, which I'm used to Menor teams. I mean, they do always have a balanced attack, but I'm used to them passing a little bit more than what they did in that game. But what an impressive win there.
Well, their running backs they don't get nearly the credit that the quarterbacks and the receivers do, just because they are a very wide-open offense. But this year they do have two more than capable running backs, led by Chris Edmonds.
Yeah.
We saw a lot of him in our game again, when we played against him, and you think you have him plugged up and you think you have him somewhat figured out, and then they can just go right up the middle or go off tackle. Their offensive line is very big, they're very athletic, and because they're able to go four wide, there's not a whole lot you can do as far as keeping guys in the box to try to stop the run. So, it was a great job by Coach Trevisano to really kind of read how the game was going and understand that, my running game is probably going to be the best option here, especially with the weather conditions the way they were. It was much more conducive to a rushing attack, especially if you're able to get success with it instead of trying to get all your yards through the air.
One of the other things is, obviously the weather played a factor, but I think Ed touched on it there a little bit, by having a solid running game and maybe going against maybe what the defensive preparation was for St. Ed's, maybe they kind of were like, hey, let's try something that we don't normally do and a little bit outside of the box, which to go outside of the box by going the cliche run the ball as much as possible, it does take some adjustment. And you said it yourself, in the second half, they went on a very long drive. They controlled the clock. They kept St. Ed's offense off the field and controlled the pace of the game. And teams that can do that and also play good enough defense to limit the opportunities that St. Ed's get, because you cannot let a team like St. Ed's get any sort of opportunity to take advantage of a mistake. And I think what you saw here from Menor was, at least defensively, about as perfect a second half as possible, because they were able to keep a very talented St. Ed's team offense off the field, and they were able, and when they were on the field, they were able to limit the damage, so to speak, that a team like St. Ed's has been doing all year. So I think we see it, at this point in the year and this point in the playoff run is the teams that can play defense consistently and get a great performance from their defensive unit usually find their way into the victory, and that's exactly what happened here. Mentor's defense did exactly what it needed to do against St. Ed's. Now the question is, can they go the next week and do it again against a team they have tape on? And there's still that loss, but again, lots changed since they played. A lot changed since St. Ignatius and Mentor played. 2 months have passed. So, now you're seeing, what can they do to maybe throw a wrinkle into the system for them, or a wrinkle in
it's going to be, it's going to be difficult looking at this regional final matchup. These two teams know each other very well. There's no, there's no secrets about it. It's going to be which team executes what they are, what they practice all week, which team executes better. And like, we mentioned, what team can make defensive stops when needed, because both these teams coming up, Mentor and St. Ignatius, have the ability to score and score a lot of points. In the last matchup, St. Ignatius came away with a 41-31 victory. So, relatively close game. So, Mentor's got some things that, will they build upon this running game again? Early outlook for the weather, I think the temperature is going to be in the 40s with the chance of some precipitation later on in the day, whether or not it's rain or snow. But, precipitation leads to running the ball. And that would be, we'll see if that can lead to a successful game for Mentor again.
This will be the third really different offensively a third different offensive opponent that St. Ignatius is going to face. In their first round matchup against Massillon Perry, very run-heavy offense, double tight. They run the ball. Against Euclid, you have a run. They're a little bit more of a pro style, but they have a lot of athletes and a lot of speed on the outside. And they were able to keep Ronald Lee contained and some of the other weapons that they have. Now going against Mentor, you're going back to four wide and the dual rushing attack that they have. So, Ignatius has kind of seen two different styles of offense in the last 2 weeks, in addition to all the independent play that they have over the course of their season. Mentor, they're going to be pretty much be facing a mirror image of what they already saw last week. I mean, St. Ignatius and St. Ed's, they play very similar offensively, and they have very similar talent as far as who they're going to be going against on both the offensive and defensive side. So we'll see. I'm looking to see how Ignatius will adjust and go back to a team like Mentor, having really needed to worry about the pure athleticism of Euclid, whereas Mentor may be more schematically a challenge. Plus, they do have a three-year starting quarterback in Todd Arunas, who's seen Ignatius a couple times. They did play each other earlier in the year, but it seems like eons ago when they played each other, just the same as Euclid and St. Ignatius did last week. So that's what I'm looking for in this match is how will Ignatius readjust and recalibrate their defense to go against a Mentor type of offense, and then similarly, can Mentor sustain the same amount of success against St. Ignatius that they were able to do against St. Ed's, and are they going to be able to keep St. Ignatius off the scoreboard? Because 21 points, I have a feeling, is not going to do it against St. Ignatius.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an offensive game, kind of like it was in the first time they met this year. But, obviously they're going to make some changes. I'm not sure who this game would favor. I would like to say Mentor just because of, the different teams they've played where a lot of them like to pass, kind of like St. Ignatius, might have prepped them a little bit better. But then Ignatius, they've played everybody, with a pretty good running attack. So, I think it's just going to say who makes the least amount of mistakes here. It's going to be cold weather, so hopefully after last week, these teams have learned that cold weather does happen in Ohio, and that you need some some Under Armour under there. Dress in layers, stay warm, keep moving, and be ready for a cold night.
Yeah, we'll move. So that's Division I, Region 1. We'll move quickly. We'll just take a quick look at Division I, Region 2. The only local team that made it into the playoffs was Lorraine. they were knocked out in the first round by the number 1 seed, the Toledo Whitmer, the Panthers out there in Lucas County. So as far as this round is concerned, Toledo Whitmer defeated Olentangy by a score of 32-29. That game was at Tiffin Columbian High School Stadium. Whitmer improves to 12-0 overall. They are the number 1 seed. They're going to take on Olentangy Liberty, the number 2 seed in this region. Olentangy Liberty was a 17-14 winner over Gahanna Lincoln. They were 7-4 coming to this matchup. Olentangy was 9-2. So a very, very, very closely contested games here in Division I Region 2, which is a welcome sight when you're getting to the second round. I mean, you had Liberty. They were the only ones that really had a very what I would consider an easy first round game in Division I Region 2. The other 3 games were very, very good games, and it seemed like anyone could have won those games and then also advanced into the next round. So we have Whitmer versus Olentangy Liberty in Division I Region 2. That game will be at Findlay High School, 7:30 kickoff next Friday for the Division I Region 2 finals.
Yeah, those are going to be some good games. And Whitmer's always solid. They're always there, but should be an interesting matchup. In Division I Region 3, it looks like you have number 5 Pickerington North. They come in at 10-2 now as they take on Pickerington Central, the number 3 seed, at 11-1, and that will be at Columbus St. Francis de Sales Alumni Stadium. And that also, like I said, all games are Friday at 7:30.
Then, we might as well go down there. Why not? So some of the teams that the big parochial schools up here see, that would be St. Ignatius and St. Ed's. They do go down to Cincinnati and vice versa to play some of those teams. So we do have in Division I Region 4 Cincinnati St. Xavier, the Bombers. They defeat Sycamore by a score of 37-7 last week to advance to the Division I Region 4 finals. Their opponent will be Cincinnati Colerain. The Cardinals are 10-2 overall. They were successful 49-21 over Mason. This was after they defeated Moeller got into the playoffs at 4-6.
Wow.
So good on them.
Some amazing teams.
Yeah. You win 4 games, you get into the playoffs. You must have done something right.
Wow.
So that's going to be a rematch of week 2 where Colerain narrowly lost to St. Xavier by a score of 20-17, and that was an overtime game. So this is it's a very similar story to what we're seeing in Division I Region 1, where we have some rematches from some very, very early games, and both teams grow and both teams mature over the course of the season, and we'll see what happens in this battle. That game will be played at Mason High School once again next Friday, kickoff at 7:30.
Yeah, I mean, you look at those teams that you mentioned, myself being from the Dayton, Cincinnati area, listing off the names: Sycamore, Colerain, St. X, Moeller, Wayne, Huber Heights, Wayne, Centerville's in that. Those are, I mean, you want to talk about a perennial bracket. Look at the Division I Region 4. That's year in, year out. The only difference is where they're seated. So you look at a team like St. X, and I think St. Xavier out of Cincinnati, in my opinion, probably has the best shot to make it to the state finals out of that, because I think they're going to get the winner of the Division 3.
It would be Region 3.
Okay. So, and they have played a couple of those schools. I don't think they played either Pickerington Central or North, but the way that St. Xavier in that division is playing, I mean, they beat up on St. X pretty good. St. Ignatius pretty good, and that's taking nothing away from St. Ignatius, who's had a very good season and is a very good team. I look for St. Xavier to be to be one of the slots in there going forward. Like I said, I'm very curious. Division I Region 1, because Menor and St. Ignatius have played each other. There's film. And, again, we say it every time when this happens, and we're going to say it probably again tonight. very, very difficult to beat a team twice in one season when there's already film on there and you can correct the mistakes that you made the first time around, and you can maybe pull something out that's not your normal, not your modus operandi, so to speak.
All right.
Yeah, that's Latin, baby.
Wow.
Good thing you took Latin in, what was it, college or high school?
I didn't take Latin at all.
Oh,
I did
wow.
3 years, and I don't remember that at all.
I don't know if I remember.
I watched a
one
lot of
thing.
detective shows. So.
Oh, nice.
And when you watch it with the subtitles, they actually don't say M.O., they put modus operandi. So
Wow.
Impressive.
Yeah.